as we get started, hear a little bit from you, Ricky, about how the show came together and how you chose the images for the show and the book.
Yeah. Ooh. I should be singing. Hi everyone, I'm Ricky Blakesberg. Jay Blakesberg is my dad, and I had the honor of co-curating this wonderful exhibit with him and David, of course. This is a huge passion project for me, working with my father, putting this beautiful show together. I'm really excited for you guys to walk through. It's a 30-year span of the Grateful Dead, so it's really just everything that involved Jerry Garcia. And we organized it by decades, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and we also included a deadhead wall, which I think really brings everything together. And I think that I've never really seen the Grateful Dead presented in a fine art way like this, and it's so beautiful to see it come to life in this way. It's so chic, it's so beautiful, and I just feel very honored to be able to be brought on this journey alongside these amazing photographers. And thank you, David, for bringing this to life, and thank you, Raina, and I'm just thankful for the whole David Cordancy team. So I'm really excited for you guys to go in there and experience the journey, but first, let's hear from these photographers.
But wait, hang on, what's that shirt you're wearing?
Oh yeah, so I actually found the shirt. This is from my dad's first Grateful Dead show, English Town, September 3rd, 1977. There's only one photo of him from that show. He didn't take it, I think his sister took it, and it's of him laying on the ground with a bong on his chest. And this shirt, it came to me, I was looking for a cool Grateful Dead shirt to wear to this event, and I found it online, and it's legit. Has a cool back too. Yeah.
Who were the and friends?
New Riders and Marshall Tucker. New Riders and Marshall Tucker. I was 15 years old at that show.
This is a great night.
This is a good night.
I'm holding on to this.
Oh, you don't like this night? Oh, my bad. All right, well, I hope you guys all enjoy, and thanks.
Thanks, Ricky. We love you.
So, I mean, Ricky, you touched on something that I think is a really important part of this, is that we're not really here looking at images either in the book or in the show of people who weren't just on assignment to shoot the Grateful Dead. Everybody was involved either as a fan, as a manager, as a partner, as something else. So Jay, maybe you could start and tell us a little bit about that journey, showing up as a fan, in hand, and making these images.
His microphone's breaking down. Showing up as a fan, taking photos. So, the Grateful Dead, the interesting thing about the Grateful Dead is that they always let any photographer bring a camera into the show from 1965 until 1995. Somewhere in the 80s, when corporate America took over the record companies and changed the rules a little bit, they started putting restrictions on who could photograph rock bands. Henry Diltz, who's here, would know that. Things started shifting. Thanks for coming, Henry. We love you. And but the Grateful Dead let anybody. So there was a whole group of people that were amateur photographers that maybe later became pros, that maybe were Sports Illustrated photographers, but deadheads and brought their camera to shows. So that's why this band is so well documented, is because anybody can bring a camera. And I think that was sort of the ethos of Jerry. You know, record the show, I'm done with it, it's yours. Take a picture, we don't care, we're done with it, it's yours. And so that's why there's so many great photographs. And so for me, my journey started 15 years old. I went and saw the Grateful Dead in English Town with my sister. Exactly 1 year later, Labor Day weekend, 1978, I photographed the Grateful Dead for the first time. I was 16 years old. I started my senior year of high school 2 or 3 days later, borrowed my dad's Pentax camera, thanks Bill Blakesberg. And here I am, you know, 45 years later, still doing what I started doing then. And so, you know, we're really fortunate that the Grateful Dead let us be us, is really what happened. They let us photographers be us, they let the fans. You know, Steve Parrish, the legendary Grateful Dead roadie, said to me, I was on his radio show a week ago, he goes, man, I really wish we let you guys backstage a lot more back in the 70s. And then he's like, I'm really glad we didn't, because there's a lot of shit that nobody should have. So, but I was an outsider until I became an insider. Stuart?
Thanks, Jay. It's illuminating to hearing all that. I'm wondering from you, Ron, I mean, you had a different kind of involvement from the beginning when you showed up with these guys. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how you found your way in, and you know, what was it like to be carrying a camera? How did people react? How did the camera inform the way you moved around the scene?
Well, I'm dead, so I had to have You know, at Woodstock, Weir kept getting shocked in his lip. He's like, it was hilarious. I mean, it was not funny, but it was hilarious. Every time he tried to sing, you could see the sparks arc from the microphone to his lip. And anyway, that's another story. Maybe that's not another story. There was a guy in the Grateful Dead that was really something. His name was Augustus Owsley Stanley III. His grandfather, yeah, he deserves a hand. He was an amazing guy. His grandfather was the governor of Kentucky at some point, and his father was a state senator from Kentucky. Owsley was well brought up, and Owsley was smart. And he took acid and liked it, and he made some, and we all liked it. And he walked, the first time he took it, a young lady named Melissa brought some from college, and he took it, and he walked outside, and he saw the parking meters kissing the cars. And he said, anything that produces that kind of effect, I have to spend my life doing. And he did, and he did. Where was I? Oh, yeah. I had kids. I took pictures. And I joined the Grateful Dead because I knew a little bit about business. And they had two unbelievable, their names have not been mentioned, brilliant managers who actually were the managers of the music scene in the park. Danny Rifkin, who's now living in Saigon, and Rock Scully, who's now living in heaven. And they were rather amazing guys. And I came to San Francisco and retired from Wall Street and took up, believe it or not, archery. And so every single day I went out to the archery field, and there was a guy that stood next to me, and we shot 84 yards. That was my little range, my practice range. 84 yards, and I shot at a silver dollar. And I had to walk back and forth with this guy because I figured out that you don't want to be walking to get your arrows while the guy is shooting his arrows down, you know what I mean. So, and his name was Speedy. His real name was Anson Pryor. He was a pressman at the San Francisco Chronicle. He had a job. And he lived with a family, a woman and her husband, Jimmy and Annie Corson. And they rented out rooms, and they got by that way. And Annie was a fabulous cook, and on weekends cooked meals. Danny and Rock went and got a meal for $5 or $6. It was extraordinary. And they said they just found a rock and roll band, and they're going to make a fortune, but they don't know anything about business. So Anson Pryor said, hey, listen, I shoot arrows every single day with a crazy guy from New York. And all he does while we're walking 84 yards, two ways, is talk about money and mergers and acquisitions and some brothers that bought railroads and the weirdest shit you ever heard in your life. He knows everything about money. So they said, oh, we want to meet this guy. So Danny and Rock came to my office one day. My secretary came into I had an office then. They came into my office and said, there's two guys out here. I said, do they have an appointment? You know, they're not going to need an appointment. So two guys come in. At that time, I was a dandy. I used to have my hair cut by a razor blade, by a guy, by hand. A comb and a straight razor. And my hair was not cut, it was coiffed. Anyway, so...
What about the photography?
Right. So Danny and Rock take a picture. Rock had straight hair like Cochise. Danny had hair out past his shoulders. I didn't know what the hell was going on. They told me about the Grateful Dead. They asked me if I liked music. I said, no, I like pictures. And they said, okay. And they said, you got to come meet these guys. And then the Grateful Dead, through them, sent a message that I could not meet them until I met Owsley. So Owsley came to my office. And Owsley came and saw a big package from B&H Photo Supply in New York on my desk. And he opened it. Owsley was he opened it up and took everything out and told me how to use every single piece, and didn't say one word. This is like me in photography. He didn't say one word about the Grateful Dead, and went back to the Grateful Dead and said, they found the guy. He didn't ask me one question about business, nothing. So I get a chance to meet Garcia. So the Friday night comes up, the Grateful Dead are playing at the Fillmore. I go and I spend 2 hours talking to Jerry, and I only know how to talk about money. So I talk about money, and Jerry is very polite, and he don't give a crap about what I'm talking about, nothing. And finally, he says to me, this is where photography starts, man. He says to me, he turned to me and said to me, what would you do if there was no more such thing as money? And I said, uh-oh, this guy is talking with me. And I couldn't say a word. And he looked at me. Jerry was a master communicator, a master. When he was communicating with you, it was hard to get his attention, but when he was communicating with you, you were the only thing happening in the world, period. He knew the secret of real effective communication. So I didn't know what to say. So it took me 6 minutes to answer, roughly, on this guy's screwing with me. Why is he doing that? He hasn't been that kind of guy up till now. Why would he do that now? He really means it. What would I do if there was no such thing as money? And I get the idea. I would find wealthy guys, have them send me to places that were in question, and I would talk to people, make notes, and take pictures, and I would bring back the truth. And I can do that. And Jerry said to me, do you know any photographers who do that you respect? And I said, one. He said, what's his name? I said, you won't know him. He's a remote Frenchman. His name was Henri Cartier-Bresson. So he said, I know Bresson's work. You can do that? I said, I can do it, and I can do it good. He said, if you can do it, and you can do it good, change your life. Come live with us. The world is going to be in front of our stage, and it's not going to take long. At the Fillmore. Is that a photography story? Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Okay.
So the photographer was, when do I get, do they vote whether I get a company credit card or not? Okay. Okay, yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Ron. I was a photographer then. Rosie, what about you? I mean, you show up, how do you get hooked up with the scene? You're a photographer in some way, and what does the camera mean to you in that scene? What are you looking at? You know, the images you take, what are you looking for?
Hello? Okay. So, when I was 12 years old, I borrowed my father's. When I was 12 years old, I borrowed my father's camera to go photograph an event at, I think it was middle school graduation. And there's something about that captured me from that day. It felt really good to have a camera in my hand, and it gave me something to do. I was a little bit shy. And so I kept borrowing the camera to do other events. And at 12, by the time I was 13, I owned the camera. And my father got tired of me borrowing it, so just keep it. And I was compelled from that day on, and I'm going to be 80 next year. From that day on, I was compelled to document my life as a photojournalist of my own life. And I have thousands of photos of just about everything that I've done. Well, fast forward to my 20th birthday. I had been dating Phil Lesh for a few months, and the Grateful Dead suddenly moved to LA. And they moved to a house that's about 4.5 miles from here. Just a side note, everybody thinks that they lived in Watts. They did not. We lived on 3rd and West Adams, which is about 4 miles from here. So on my 20th birthday, I'd been dating Phil, and all of a sudden the pranksters decided to move to LA and do acid tests down here. And the Dead had become kind of the house band for the acid tests. And so the Dead went, you know, they invited the Dead to come. They didn't have the means to do it themselves, but Owsley wanted really badly to join the circus, you know, be part of it. So he offered to fund the move and to rent the house and to pay for their equipment and be kind of their benefactor. Benevolent dictator is what I call him. But anyway, so Owsley and the Dead moved down here to LA to do some acid tests. And I was left crying in San Francisco because the circus had left town and taken my boyfriend with it. So when Phil asked me to come down and join him and live with him, I stopped everything and I went. So, you know, as an aside, it's one of those women's whither thou goest kind of tales, you know, as a woman completely changes her life for love. And I came down here and I had a VW Bug, I had a small suitcase full of clothes, and I had a camera. And the rest is in the gallery.
It's great to hear these stories and get a sense of how participatory this was and is as a photo project, if we can even use that word. Curious to hear from you, Shirley, a little bit on the other side. You know, you're somebody that looks at these kinds of images for a living and thinks about how they make their way out into the world. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how these kinds of images do that, what you're seeing and how the stories are important and not important and the visual stuff, anything you can talk about there.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Well, first of all, I would say, you know, I grew up in the 80s, a little bit later, and had one of those rooms where, like, your room was your temple with all your posters and your photos. And this is where I got my appreciation for music photography, was because I stared at it all the time. And then I would go to the Route 18 flea market, right down the street from Englishtown, and look for live photos, like 6x8s or whatever they were selling for $1. And I would be like, look at this amazing exclusive photo I have of John Taylor from Duran Duran, you know, whoever it was at the time. But that got my appreciation for photography, and I kind of made music a career because I loved it so much and I wanted to be a music journalist. I wanted to be a female music journalist, which was sorely lacking at the time. And felt confident that I could hold a conversation about pretty much any artist, any genre, like very well versed, but not as well versed as I am in the Grateful Dead, who I just has been such a constant in my life since, you know, the 80s, and I did see a bunch of shows, late 80s and 90s. Anyway, but when I got into journalism, my first internship was at High Times magazine, which, can you imagine, like, working there? It was trying to get all these editors in for like a noon morning meeting, quote unquote, was like impossible, and everything was a mess. And the job that they ended up giving me after my internship was photo editor. So I had to learn, like, on the job, how to create these crazy sculptures made of weed that would look like Stonehenge, and then any of the weed that got absorbed by the lights or smoked, we would have to pay for after we rented the weed, okay? And no idea was too insane for this magazine to put on its cover. And it was selling like hotcakes in those days because weed was illegal, it was taboo. So it was a very successful magazine, and that's where I really jumped into photography. And I've got to say, I've probably seen more photos of the Grateful Dead than any other artist, living or dead, and I've worked at like 12 different magazines. So I've seen a lot. And the difference between the photography of the Dead is, one, it's not just the band, it's the fans. It's the scene, it's the culture, it's the vibe. It's also incredibly American. I'm sure that there was a Shakedown Street in Greece when they played there or whatever, but I doubt it would have been as cool as it was at like Boston Garden, right? So I learned to appreciate what makes a good live photo and what tells the story of the band through its fans. And, you know, having been just like always attracted to the counterculture, I really leaned into it. I spent many years at High Times and we did insane photo shoots with everyone from Ozzy Osbourne to Cypress Hill to Willie Nelson. You know, we got to sit and smoke with the greats. But, you know, Jerry died in '95 and I never had that opportunity to interview him, sit down with him. But I knew that face, you know? I'd seen it so much. And then I'll just end with being at the Sphere this last year for Dead & Co. You know, seeing all those images, seeing San Francisco, seeing Haight-Ashbury, seeing all these things that we read about and imagined, and then they're there, and it's immersive, and it envelops you. It just took it to a whole other level. And without Jay's photography, I don't know what their reference material would have been like. It's so much you, from the story, and the exhibit was excellent too, which featured photography by Bob Weird's daughter as well. Anyway, that is my story. Continue, Stuart.
Thanks, Shirley. Actually, it makes me think and want to ask you, Jay, I mean, thinking about telling a story with these images. I mean, each image tells a story, of course, but there's a way that things get edited together to tell a story, and a lot of that's what's happening in this show. I mean, there's the story of the dead, and then there's the story of Grateful Dead photography, and under there too, a certain story of rock photography. And maybe you could talk a little bit about what it's like to tell those stories in book form and show form.
So just a little bit of background on this exhibit, which we're all going to go in and see, is that in 2023, when Dead & Company were finishing their touring years and playing in San Francisco, I was talking to Bernie and Liz and Red, who are the management for Dead & Co. And I said, can we do an exhibit in San Francisco for the fans? And they said, that would be great. I had a venue, which was the Haight Street Art Center. And so we launched this exhibit, it had 98 photographs. Ricky and I curated it. And David Kordansky saw that exhibit. And afterwards, I ran into him on the ball field, met him for the first time, and he said, this is incredible, I want to do a book of that exhibit. And I was like, yeah, crazy man, go away. And so that's how I met David Kordansky on the ball field at Oracle. And then when Sphere was announced, the management team, Red, specifically came to me and said, hey, can we take that exhibit you did in San Francisco and bring it to Sphere for Dead Forever, which was the fan experience. And we took that 98 print exhibit and blew it up to 150 prints, which is, I think, what Shirley saw in Vegas. And it included my photographs and Rosie and Ron Rakow and Jonathan David Saban, who's sitting right here, and a bunch of different photographers, about 20 different photographers. And when David came to Vegas, he saw that, he said, are all of these photographs going to be in the book? And I said, yes, they're all going to be in the book. And so we have a book/catalog that's based on those two exhibits and the exhibit that's here that we're all going to go and see after we stand up in these chairs. And so that's sort of the birth of this whole project. And David and myself and Jennifer Gross, my dear friend who's somewhere around here, we had breakfast one day, and I think Jennifer said, we should do an exhibit at DKG. And David's like, yes, we should do an exhibit. And that's how this exhibit ended up here. And so, going back for a second, so Rosie I've known for many years. She's been in projects that we've curated, so of course we wanted to include Rosie's photograph. Ron Rakow, there's a guy here named Josh Barron, who's a dear friend of mine, and Josh and I did a book 7, 8, 9 years ago called Eyes of the World. We were working on the next book project. We discovered Ron. We started interviewing him about the Grateful Dead in 1975, and then Ron said, by the way, when I managed the Grateful Dead, I had a Nikon camera and knew how to use it. And I have thousands of photographs that have never been seen. And so, of course, Josh immediately said, you got to meet my partner, Jay Blakesberg. And so Ron and I started communicating. I think Ron told me to go fuck myself a few times. And, but eventually I went down to Southern California and I met him. And after shooting the shit with him in his apartment for 5 hours, we went to a storage locker and I found this shelf with all these produce boxes. And I started pulling them down, and they had 3-ring binders in them. And it was like Trip to Morocco, Joey's Bar Mitzvah, my parents in Brooklyn. And then I opened up a box and there was a 3-ring binder in there that said 710 Ashbury, 1967. And I said, holy fuck. And the first photograph that I saw in that book when I got home 5 hours later to San Francisco was a picture of Neil Cassidy taken in the living room of 710 Ashbury in 1967, in color, in focus, never before seen. And I started to cry. It was unbelievable. And so as I went through his work, it was all color. And then I was like, didn't you ever shoot black and white? And he said, yeah, hundreds of rolls. I'm like, where are they? He goes, I don't know. A year later, I stopped at his apartment on the way down to Santa Barbara to see Fish and Daddy Go Hollywood Bowl. And he hands me a suitcase, the kind of suitcase you buy at a garage sale for 99 cents, but it was his main luggage in 72. Leather, white, Samsonite. Naugahyde. And I go, what's this? He goes, the black and white negatives. I open it up, and there's 15 rolls of film of the Grateful Dead recording their first record in Los Angeles in January and February of 1967, which you'll see one of the photographs in the exhibit from. And that's how Ron and I connected, and how Ron's work that has been sitting in fruit boxes for 45 years is now in the ether thanks to Ricky and Retrophoto Archive and what she's doing. So that's just a little bit of backstory about the exhibit and how we got here and how some of these photographers. I want to bring up Jonathan just for one quick second here. He has an amazing photograph of RFK Stadium in '73. I had met Jonathan through the Eyes of the World book. Can you just talk to us briefly about your connection to photographing Grateful Dead, Watkins Glen, '73, and what you were doing as a young photographer? And stand up and tell us about yourself and some of your work in the 70s.
Thank you. So I'm a New Yorker, and I was born in Queens, grew up in Oceanside. When I was 7 years old, my dad was a chemical engineer. We went out back and shot a roll of Plus-X, developed it, and my life was set out for me. And I apprenticed in New York City. I went to RIT. In 1971, I had the good fortune of seeing the Dead with the New Riders at Philip Forum. And WNEW in New York, those of you that remember that, yeah, baby. They broadcast 5 hours of the Dead with Jerry played pedal steel with the New Riders for 2 hours, went away, came back, played a set, came back. I was there the next night. I was only 15 years old. I started shooting the Dead, I think in '72, at the National Coliseum, that were wearing their nudie suits, and got some great stuff of that. And then I was really lucky in 1973, June 10th, 2 nights at the 2 days, very hot days at RFK Stadium. Anybody there?
Yes!
Really incredible shows. I mean, the Allman Brothers started, and the Dead came out. It was amazing. And people used to ask, how do you get up there? Because my dad gave me his Minolta. I had a 135 millimeter lens. Used to roll my own Tri-X film. So my gig was, regardless of the state of mind I was in, I always went to the side, worked my way in, and so I ended up right in the middle, and I have these really incredible photographs of the entire Dead, and Jerry was wearing the pigtails, and he was wearing the clef, and there's some really iconic photographs there. And then later that year, I was in Watkins Glen. I don't remember a lot, to be perfectly honest with you, but it was an amazing show also. And then, Hartford, and I remember seeing the Dead 3 nights in a row at the Academy of Music.
Did your work stay in like shoeboxes for decades until you sort of revisited it?
No, that's a great question. Any Long Islanders here? Island Park, there used to be a headshot called Mustache. And Dickie there, my boss in New York City, when I was in work, doing company work, he allowed me to, all the film I wanted, all the prints I wanted. So I made hundreds and hundreds of prints of there's a very iconic photograph of mine of Bobby standing at the microphone screaming, "Not fade away!" And I sold, that's how I worked my way through college, was selling these 8x10s with Jerry and Phil and the band and Bobby at Mustache in Island Park. So, they say that to be a professional photographer, you have to sell something. You have to make $1. And that's how I made my first dollars, was selling Grateful Dead.
How much were your 8x10s?
They were like $15.
Mine were $1 in the parking lot of Dead shows.
It was inflation. So this, this was the 70s. From what I remember, I maybe they were less, but I thought that's about what we were selling them for.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm going to, real quick, hang on, we'll do questions in a little bit. I'm going to bring up another photographer. So along with the exhibit, I mentioned that we have this book. It's called Grateful Dead, An American Beauty, Grateful Dead, 1965, 1995. And if you're a Deadhead, you pretty much have seen every single photograph of the Grateful Dead. And over the last 7, 8 years, Ricky and I have started this retro photo archive. And I want to give a shout out to Taylor in the back there, who works for us at Retro Photo Archive. And she edits all of our archival photography and figures out what we should scan. And thanks for coming down. And this book that we put out has 275 photographs in it, and there's 150 of them that have never been published in books before, which is kind of unheard of at this stage in the game to find photographs. And some of those photographs that I discovered, a couple years ago, I acquired Dan Healy's archive. Dan Healy was the sound man for the Grateful Dead, and it was ephemera, memorabilia, backstage passes, records, and things like that. And there was this stack of crumbled up 11 by 14 photographs, prints of pictures of speaker cabinets at the Wall of Sound, and I had no idea who took them. And then I stumbled upon this guy on Facebook named Ben Haller. And I contacted Ben, and Ben is here, and he's going to come over and say a few words. And Ben worked for Bill Graham at the Fillmore East, and then joined the Grateful Dead lighting crew, and he had a camera with them. And we have, I think, 8 or 9 photos of Ben's in the Grateful Dead book that have never been published before. Tell us a little bit about your journey photographing the Grateful Dead and how you got involved.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank High Times Magazine, because they gave every member of the crew, now it's a pot, the centerfold of the magazine every month. So every month we got fresh supplies. So the thing I liked about the Dead was the conversations and the intelligence. And I'd go talk to Jerry, we'd talk about Elmer Bernstein, and the effect he had. He did Man with the Golden Arm, the soundtrack, and he affected many other guys. Then I told him I was working for Sven Nykvist, and I described the way Sven Nykvist lights. Every other cameraman has a meter, and he's going around. Sven would squint at the subjects till they were all balanced nicely. Then he'd take an old Pentax spot meter, read the actress's cheek. And when I told that to Jerry, he freaked out. He loved it. So he was very into film. Bear was interesting to talk to. Healy was a font of information. So it was just fun to get around. Bear never came up with anything new. He stole everything, but he stole great things like the 2 microphones and the column of speakers and the wall of sound. Were all other people's ideas, but Bear would take them, put them to work, and we made them work on the stage. Those 2 microphones are what's in everybody's cell phone now for sound cancellation. So it's a really great time. You probably saw me if you went from, say, 68 through 74, I'd be climbing in the scaffolding somewhere. So, moving lights for Candace. So.
Thank you, Ben. Ron Rakow has a Ben Haller story.
We had an office upstairs. There was a McIntyre office and a Sam Cutler office, and we parked in the parking lot in the back. And one day, some mean person came with a tow truck and tried to tow away our equipment. Ben Haller was a different size and shape then. Then you should have seen the size of this guy that was riding the tow truck. Okay. Well, the next time I saw the guy, Ben Haller had the guy bent over backwards and was making him into a bowl. No bullshit. Remember? The guy unhooked. Did you ever hear of a tow truck driver unhooking something he's already had the hook on? Ben got him to do that, and he was thanking him for letting him do that. He almost broke him in half. That was Ben Allen.
Great job. And actually, I've been thinking, from what I understand, you know, the Dead and backstage and the roadies, it could be a rather jocular place to live. There was a lot of certain kind of testosterone sometimes. I'm wondering, it makes me think of your movement through all this, Rosie, and like what it was like to be around that, but also how the camera helped translate that. What was your experience?
Yes, swimming in testosterone. You could describe it. Because I was there from the beginning, and I was an intimate family member, and I was always had a camera, and I was kind of invisible, and I was hot too.
Ron has topless photos of Rosie in a swimming pool in '71 in France.
And bottomless.
Yes, it's a gorgeous photo. And after I pass, go for it. It's really a beautiful photo. Where was I? Besides naked in a swimming pool in France. Ron and I have shared many adventures from the very early days. Yeah, testosterone. Sorry, but the segue didn't work. My brain didn't go there. Where was I?
Well, just, I mean, okay, so testosterone, and then, but you've got a camera and all this. You're not just, you know, you're sometimes clothed with a camera around.
Here's the thing. I always, when we were talking about the crew, and the band and the crew, and the truck drivers and all of that, all of the years that I was an intimate, and I was in the what I call the heart of the beast, and I had a camera or didn't have a camera at a given time, but I was always treated with respect. I know that all of the women were not treated the same way that I was treated, and that's, you know, it makes me sad. I don't know what the difference, maybe because I was around for so long, I was just part of I was just there, you know, I was just part of the atoms. But, so I was able to take photos, and when I self-published 2 books. One is called Dancing with the Dead, and it's a 60,000 word memoir. I gather some of you have read it. It's been available for 12 years now, and it still is. More recently, I was privileged and thrilled to be able to put together a coffee table book with 400 of my photos, which sold out of 2 printings. And I thank all of you for that being able to happen. But I lost my train of thought.
That's good. I'm assuming we're okay on time. I'm just going to keep trucking along. Yeah. Question? Okay. Well, we need questions now.
Rosie, you were there during that shoot of Bob Sider in Daly City with all the mirrors. Can you tell us more about how?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I'll repeat the question. Bob Siderman took a photo that became very well known of the Grateful Dead. It was a posed photo taken in Daly City. It's a black and white photo, and they're on a street in a housing development with their faces are like circles of bright light, and it's all black and white, and it's real stark. How many of you are familiar with the photo I'm talking about? Okay, Bob Siderman took that photo, and in order to, the question is how, I was there for the photo shoot, and how was that set up? So we were on this street in I guess it's called Ceremony, somewhere in Daly City. And it was like a Sunday morning, and we're out there in the middle of the street. And there were 4 of us. Bob had it all figured out how he would, it was a brilliant idea. The sun was coming up behind the hill and towards us, and 4 of us were given these like makeup mirrors, little round makeup mirrors, and we reflected the rising sun into, or 4, I guess there was 5 of us, into the faces of the band to make that bright circle, and everything else was like very high contrast, black and white. You know, look it up if you haven't seen it. Bob Seidemann was a photographer, and yeah, so that's how we.
And what time did you start to get those guys there for sunrise?
Yeah, I didn't get them there.
Sure.
Yeah, I do recall that somebody called the cops, and they made us move. You know, that the cops said, you can't be out here blocking traffic. I mean, there's no cars anywhere, but, and so we, rather than get in trouble, we like bagged it. The cops went away, we went up the street and did it again, so.
And how many takes, last question, to get that reflection? and
I don't
gravitation?
really know. I wasn't the photographer, so.
The reflection in his sunglasses is just so incredible.
Yeah, it was a brilliant artistic effort.
Interesting story about how a photo is made. So it's a good question. And we're a little short on time, so I'd like to open it up, but I think maybe we can keep it amongst us here because I'm wondering, Ron, if you could answer maybe what might be a last question. But I like there's your images on that wall in there, like of the band playing out on the street in San Francisco. You know, there's an image of Lesh with this yellow shirt. It's beautifully exposed. It's clear as a bell. I imagine everybody's high as shit when this is going on. Like, how are you? I'm just impressed over and over again with all of you, actually, and how beautiful and crisp these images are. When I imagine states are altered when this is happening.
We didn't get high to have excuses. We got high to get better.
I want to point out from Stuart's question, you know, these photographs that Ron took in the 60s are all color slides, right? So if you know what that means, it's a positive, it's a transparency. And if your exposure is off by a half a stop, your photo is ruined, whereas a color negative has a lot more exposure latitude, and you can be underexposed by, let's say, 2 stops and still get an image. And so it is fairly miraculous. It's a miracle, but it's also a testament to Ron actually understanding the art and the science of photography. And that's what we all did back then. Rosie as well, exposing color slide film. Jonathan, Ben, myself, is that, you know, nowadays we can take a picture and look at it on the back of our camera and say, too light, too dark, you know, whatever it is, and adjust it instantly. But we had to understand both the technology, you know, sometimes we had to shoot photographs, go get them developed, come back a week later, you know, figure out what we did right or wrong, and then try and recreate that. And that's, you know, we didn't have the internet to say, how do you expose black and white film? You know, we couldn't figure that stuff out. We had to figure it out on our own, and LSD probably helped us. Right?
Made me.
Anybody else got a question? Ricky's got a question or a statement.
I'm just wondering, for the photographers here, what the experience was like walking into the gallery today and seeing your images on the wall, what emotions they evoked, and, you know, if it brought back certain smells, like what did Jerry smell like? You know, but you know, just little moments that maybe you forgot, but when you saw these images up here, what did it make you feel?
Okay, I'm also, I have one image in this exhibit, and it's in the middle of the wall, on the back wall there, and it's the Grateful Dead, the Live Dead live album photo shoot outtake. And it's the guys clustered around this 1955 Ford, or 54 Ford, and they're like, you know, there's a painting on the left it says live, and on the right it says dead, and they were putting together a live album. And I've been asked to tell the story of that photograph because it's kind of mysterious. So we were at the practice hall warehouse in Nevada, California, and I was doing women's work. I was rolling joints, and I was up in the front rolling joints up in the office, and they were in the back rehearsing. And the phone rang, and it was Warner Brothers Records. They had been, they were putting together the release of the Live Dead album, which was a double album, and it had been recorded, I can't remember where, I think Carousel Ballroom and maybe the Avalon in January of '69. This was September of '69, and Warner Brothers had just realized that they didn't have a band photo, a group photo for the album, and they were going to release it like in a few weeks. So they called the practice hall and they said, we need a group photo yesterday. And so somebody else answered the phone and, you know, covered the receiver and said, hey, Rosie, you got your camera? I said, of course. Okay, let's do a group photo. So the only time ever that I actually interrupted the Grateful Dead while they were playing. It's not something I would do lightly, but the sun was going down, I had 45 minutes, and, you know, no idea. I ran outside, I saw the car, I saw the space, ran back in, and interrupted the band and said, listen guys, we got a photo emergency. Now, everybody come on out to the back and pick up something, you know, like a plant, a table, a chair, a framed portrait of Abraham fucking Lincoln. I mean, whatever. I mean, that's just what ended up over there. And within about 5 or 10 minutes, everybody was outside, and I posed them. I got a big ladder and stood up, you know, up on it. And took a bunch of pictures. I only had one roll of film, and it was color slide film. Unforgiving, like Jay says. So we took, there's one missing piece, and I'm sure many of you know this part of it, is that in the photo that they used, there's a man laying face down in the dirt in the middle of the photo. You folks know which I'm talking about? Yeah. You'll see it in a minute. It's over there. Anyway, so I took the photos, ran down to the lab, and got there just as they were closing. Anyway, got down to LA. The photo got down to LA. They turned it into a black and white, put it into the, you know, when you open the album, it's the group photo that's in the middle. And they never returned the slide. That's the punchline of that. Which is why that photo is not the photo that's in the album. Why the outtake is the photo that you're going to see. Is that you know, you have an original slide. If it's gone, it's gone. And it's somewhere, I don't know, in Burbank in some basement, you know, or, you know, disintegrated years ago. But that's the story of that. And it really kind of illustrates just kind of the casual, no, I was not a professional photographer, and I was, whatever needed to get done, we just did. It's like, oh, okay, well, it's a photo, let's call Rosie, you know, and whatever. So that's my story, I'm sticking to it.
We just got a little bit of a blonde. What are your feelings on seeing the show and walking in, and what it looks like to you?
The overriding thumbprint of the whole Grateful Dead, start to finish, front door to back door, before you get into the car to after you come home from the gig, everybody cared. And they cared with such intensity, it was almost too personal to watch. And I want to tell you a little story. Bill Graham put on a show every New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve, 1972. The night ended, and it was 1973 73. Bill Graham had a practice after he came down on the wire and did all that stuff. He fed everybody at 6 o'clock in the morning. And then he went back to his office, buttoned it up, and then left. He was the last person in the building. And he's walking out of the Winterland at the back door, and he hears mumbling. No one is supposed to be in the building. No one. And this is like a king in his domain. No one's supposed to be in the building. And he wanders around and goes backstage, and he sees a man sitting on a case, talking to a bank of amplifiers, crying, saying, and the guy was saying, how could you do this to me? I gave you life. This is the most important night of the year. How could you possibly do this to me? And the guy was hysterically crying. And Bill Graham and that guy didn't get along so great. But Graham melted, walked over, picked that Alfie up off the case, hugged him, and took him out the back door and locked him with the land. And that was 1973. That's how much Owsley cared.
Well, for me, I love seeing the exhibit. I'm super proud of my daughter, Ricky. She really crushed it on this one. Ricky also curated the book. You guys know there's a book that goes along with it. It's for sale up on the steps there. I think they're going to give us Sharpies, and so Rosie, Ron, myself, Ben Haller, Jonathan David Saban will all sign your copies. If you want to get it, please ask us. We'll hopefully come up with clever things to say inside. We encourage you to walk into the exhibit, check it out. David Kordansky, thank you so much. We love you. We appreciate you. Stand up, baby. Just say hi to everybody. And look at this crowd that's here in the gallery. Thank you, David. Thank you, Raina, who helped us with the whole exhibit. So many people helped with this exhibit, the entire staff at TKG. We love you. This is amazing. I'm super proud of my work, Ron's work, Rosie, everybody that's in the book, in the exhibit. Thank you, Mark and Leah, for coming, and everybody else that's here. We have lots of people that are involved in the Grateful Dead scenario, such as these folks. Eric Greenspan over here. Thanks for coming, Eric. We appreciate you. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy. Photographers come up here for a photo, apparently. Ben,
Thank you, Jay.
JB Saban. Thank you, Stuart Krimko. Yeah, we can do the time.